Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Thursday, January 5th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. What a difficult week all around in the NFL. One of its showcase games this season ended in suspension in the first quarter when Bills safety Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field and suffered cardiac arrest in Cincinnati on Monday night. Now, on the eve of the final week of the regular season, we don't know what's going to happen with that game between top AFC teams and how the Chiefs will be impacted when it comes to playoff seeding. We discuss those topics on today's SportsBeat KC with star columnists Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell, plus beat writers Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell. We also talk about the Chiefs-Raiders game on Saturday, with the Chiefs bidding to match a club record 14 victories in the regular season. The show started as a SportsBeat Live broadcast, so let's get started. Hey, good morning and welcome to SportsBeat Live. This is our weekly conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs with the folks in the media who know them best and with you. So send us your questions and comments and we'll get to as many of them as we can. I don't know if you guys get on the call, how early you do, but George has been running in the last few weeks either a Patrick Mahomes or an Andy Reid clip from a news conference, and we heard from Patrick Mahomes today, and this was the first time that I've heard the Chiefs talk about the Damar Hamlin situation, and I thought Patrick Mahomes handled it pretty well. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the way that the Chiefs addressed everything at the news conference on Wednesday. I guess that will continue in some fashion today. So we've got Sam McDowell, Herbie Teope, Vahe Gregorian, and Jesse Newell with us. And Sam, I'll start with you. What were I don't know what the expectations were for how the Chiefs would react, but as usual, I enjoyed what I heard from Patrick Mahomes, and I thought he kind of hit all the right notes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was just very genuine. I think his presser was like 6.5 minutes, and the entirety of it was focused on Damar Hamlin, and he was very honest with his reaction to it. I mean, said it puts things in a new perspective, and I think what we learned most from talking to Patrick Mahomes, from talking to some guys in the locker room yesterday, were this had the same impact on them that it did on us. And I think there was this expectation that because these are NFL guys, that they think this comes with the territory. They recognize that injuries come with the territory. They recognize that could even be a season-ending injury, that potentially could be a head injury. And look, over the past 10 years, I would say, we've learned a lot more about the long-term effects of playing football. I don't think any of these guys realize that it could be that severe while they're playing. And so I think as much as this seemed like very jarring thing to us, of course their care and thoughts were going to be with Damar Hamlin, but they were just as jarred as the rest of us were by this. And you could tell that from the moment Patrick Mahomes walked in the room. And throughout his 6 minutes yesterday, it was just very evident that this was with him on Monday. He said he stayed up later than normal on Monday, just trying to find updates on Damar Hamlin, hoping that they would release something, that he's been at practice every day. And as soon as he gets back to the locker room, he immediately checks to see if there's been any updates. So that's all to say, this is going to be sticking with, I think, a lot of these guys beyond just this week, beyond just these press conferences that we're hearing them in.
I think one of the things that one of my first of many reactions was the fact that it wasn't a head injury. You know, I thought we've seen players go back down after a collision, you know, that involved the helmets, but because this was to the basically to the chest, and he went back down. That's when I thought, wow, just this is going to be bad, and it was. Rob lets us know the family just tweeted that Hamlin is awake. I've been following the coverage on NFL Network this morning, and the latest news is good. Herbie, I don't know if have you been keeping up with it on social media and NFL Network and the like.
Well, the good news is his family, he's got a spokesperson, and, he is making progress. So that's the encouraging sign. And I just saw, can't remember his name. Let me pull that up. The commenter said that I guess there's a tweet out right now that he is awake. So there's all encouraging signs for him right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Hey, all of us fiddled around at football as kids. Vahe, you're the only one that played it at a at a level beyond recreation or high school, and I want to know if obviously you hadn't experienced anything quite like this, but do you remember seeing somebody have a serious injury on the football field?
I do remember not a life-threatening type of thing, right? But a chilling thing. My freshman year of college, where a guy had a compound fracture of his ankle, and the scream. It was over on our sideline in Philadelphia, and the scream. Everybody on our team heard the scream, and think about this. That's again not life-threatening, not anything approximating the horror that those guys felt the other day. But even that obviously sends something through you. Patrick used the term chills the other day, and I think we all felt that watching it that night. So it's anyway, that comes to mind. And I think Sam and Jesse's coverage with everything yesterday really eloquently spoke to the difference here, the hinge of this being that you take the idea of injuries almost for granted, right? You don't, and you even maybe take the idea of long-term damage as something. Well, I accept that, but you don't often. None of these guys in this situation on a football field have stared at the actual life and death component, and that's something that's really a distinction here. Sam asked Andy Reid, and Andy just kind of misunderstood the question yesterday, but this is sort of at the heart of the ongoing question here. Sam, you can maybe rephrase it better than I can, but the whole point was how much of what we saw in the Chiefs players' reaction yesterday was their anguish over Damar Hamlin specifically, right? They all felt that specifically, but how much are they feeling inside something else altogether about their own level of risk?
Yeah, that would have been a better way to phrase it because he might have understood it. But Marquez Valdez-Scantling actually did have a quote along those lines where he basically said that it could have been any of us. And I think every football player in the country feels that. Jesse, I think, was there for that. So, listen, that's what I thought was most telling talking to all the guys is I think a lot of guys were, as much as they continue to say that they were praying for Damar Hamlin, I think it was natural for them to put themselves in his shoes, maybe put their family in his family's shoes for what they're going through. And Juan Thornhill was asked if he thought some guys might think about stepping away. And he said he did think that some guys later in their careers might consider that. Now, he clarified he's not one of them, and he hopes that nobody makes that decision. But I've talked to some former players throughout the week who absolutely think that we're going to be surprised by some early retirements in March after people saw this.
Hey, Blair, can I just quick interject one other thought to this? And it's something Sam and I specifically talked about, and maybe Jesse and I talked a little bit about it too. But the thing that's complicated and an extra layer to all this is that it's very tempting to say, just put this in the category of the hideous violence of the game and the stuff that, makes us flinch about head injuries. But as you articulated at the very start of this, Blair, this wasn't that. And there's a freakish element to this. It wouldn't happen to you walking down the street, right? But it's quite evidently the blow at the time it hit in the rhythm of his heart. At least that's what's been out there from a number of doctors. We don't fully know that yet. I hope I pronounce it right. Some insinuation of commotio cordis. I'm sure I'm not saying it right.
It's about what I've heard. Yeah.
And I spoke with one player in the locker room yesterday. It was just a casual chat, so I don't want to say who it was, but I mean, he said as a kid growing up, they had a baseball player die in his area with a ball hit back to the mound from that. And they started, the kids in that area wore chest protectors as pitchers in Little League at that point. This is a little more speculative than it probably should be, but I guess my point is, I don't know that we ought to look at this as attributable to the overall violence of the game. And that maybe it's, call me right, call me wrong on this, but that's a rather routine hit that he took. It's just the timing and placement of the hit. And I don't know what that says about it in the context of what we fear about football, but it's an element of this that's going to be in people's minds one way or another.
Yeah, but I think you're hitting on a good point. They brought out both Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Juan Thornhill to the podium, and both of them sort of had different takes on it, if you will. And I think this is going to be individual. We're all humans. We all can take this a different way. Juan Thornhill was kind of more your point, like this was just sort of an accident waiting to happen sort of thing, and it's kind of fluky, and you can't predict it. So really, it could happen to anybody, but it could happen to you if you're in a car accident. It could happen to you if lightning strikes you. It's sort of one of those things you kind of try to move on to it and use the rational side of your brain. Whereas Marquez Valdes-Scantling seemed very emotional, and Sam spoke to it earlier about football is really dangerous, and you put your lives on the line every single day when you go out there, and you understand that risk in the back of your mind, but it kind of gets shot to the forefront when this sort of thing happens. So I think you're going to see different people kind of react to different ways. That's sort of how trauma happens, and different people do react in different ways. But I think you are speaking to the main point here, Vahe, which is if this sort of thing happened 20 times a year playing football, 30 times a year playing football, there would be no football, because we would not allow it to happen as humans. We would not allow ourselves for entertainment to put people out there, high schoolers, junior high kids, college kids, professional athletes, whoever it may be, to put themselves at that sort of risk where people were dropping dead or having to be resuscitated on the field. So, this seems like a very fluky occurrence that can happen. But again, sort of your perspective on the spectrum of how you should deal with this is going to be an individual thing. I think every single chief is going to give you a different answer.
Well, and certainly the NFL, college football, all levels of football have taken measures to improve safety over the years. There's a long list of things that have been done. And still with all that and with the type of hit that seemed, a hard hit, but not the type of hit that would cause problems, it did. It did cause problems. Paul comes up with a couple of, examples. It reminded him of Hank Gathers, the basketball player who collapsed on the floor for Loyola Marymount. I think it was 1990 is when that happened. That was, of course, that was a heart condition for Hank Gathers. And then Chris Pronger, the St. Louis Blues, nailed in the sternum. And that's kind of where I see most of I guess the worst kind of injuries is in hockey on the ice, but just because of the physical nature of that game as well. But let's not get too deep into other examples of this. I do want to talk about what the NFL might do with the rest of the schedule, with the Bengals-Bills game. But before we do, Herbie, I need my injury update, man, and I gotta tell you, we're talking about the same guys almost every week. McCole Hardman, of course, being one of them, and Harris, the on again, off again Harrison Butker saga. Let's start there, and how does it look for Saturday's game against the Raiders?
Well, let's start with McCole Hardman. They finally activated him off of injured reserve, so now the Chiefs have 6 wide receivers on their roster, and we'll see what happens here if they actually put him on the field. Over the last couple of weeks, they always said it was important to get him some football reps, and I also think that's important ahead of the playoffs. But whether he actually plays remains to be seen. As for Harrison Butker, he showed up to work on Wednesday with back spasms, and he didn't practice. Coach Andy Reid was asked, is this a scenario where you might want to bring in another kicker, just Butker can't go. And you know how Andy Reid is. Yeah, there's a chance. So we'll see what happens there. But a name to look out for is probably Matthew Wright. You know, kicked for the Chiefs earlier in the year, set the 59-yard field goal against the Raiders back in Week 5, which was then a short-lived team record. But he's a free agent right now, so I'm sure that he's probably on speed dial if the Chiefs need a kicker for Saturday. The other injuries, Joe Thuney, ankle injury. He's been limited in practice the last 2 days. L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback, with the hip injury. He was limited on Wednesday. And then Sky Moore with the hand laceration. He practiced on Wednesday as well, but was also limited.
Okay, good deal. Thanks, Herbie. Jesse, I know you've been on the story all week and about what might happen to the NFL schedule and what might happen to the Bengals-Bills game. There are two options. You play Bengals-Bills or you don't play it, right? And either one comes with complications. I guess the correct choice would be what would be the fewest complications in either scenario. No decision is made. I did hear on NFL Network today that maybe a decision will be announced today or tomorrow. I was wondering if they wouldn't wait until the weekend games are going to be played before making a decision. So, but maybe that's too late. Maybe it does happen in the next 12 to 24 hours. But why don't you take us through the scenarios and what might happen with what might happen with Bills and Bengals and how it impacts the Chiefs?
Yeah, it seems like two scenarios basically is what we've heard or been rumored, is that you basically play no contest and not resume the game and play these Week 18 games as scheduled and then start with the playoffs, go by win percentage, or you could move that game to a Week 19 and then potentially play the NFC side of the playoffs that week. Everybody in the AFC gets a bye, and then you start the AFC playoffs the next week. The NFC teams get a bye then. Honestly, it's a difficult situation. Like you said, Blair, there's a lot of ramifications no matter what you decide. I sort of think the do the least amount of harm option is going to be that no contest. I just think that if you don't call this a game and you go by the standings, it does impact the Bills in a negative way. It does impact the Bengals potentially in a negative way, but nobody asked for this. You know what I mean? Nobody asked for this sort of thing to happen. And at this moment, we're hearing reports about how the Bills and, Hamlin's family met on a Zoom call with the Bills, and they're, needed to hear from them and still very emotionally attached to ask these teams to go out there and play this week and then play next week a standalone game and just continue to go out there. And then even potentially with that, there's negative ramifications. If you're giving the whole AFC a bye and making the Bills and Bengals play, you might not be doing those teams a service if you're kind of jostling everything around to make this game happen. So I think the no contest is the most likely option. I think that's what they're eventually going to land on. And how that impacts the Chiefs this week is in a very small way, but an important way if it does come to the end of the game, which is if the Bills had lost last week, the Chiefs could have either won or tied the Raiders to get that overall number 1 seed. Now, if this game is a no contest, the Chiefs need to win against the Raiders. A tie would move them back behind the Bills if the Bills only play 16 games. So probably not something that's going to be impacted, but something for the Chiefs to know in the back of their minds in case, you're in overtime. It's only 10 minutes now, so we've seen 2 ties this year. I think 7 since they moved it to that 10-minute period, so about 1 or 2 a year. So just something for the Chiefs to know, because if you get the ball back on your own 5-yard line with 40 seconds left, you got to take that ball down the field and try to score. In other circumstances, maybe a tie would be more relevant there, but the Chiefs need to win this game. Obviously, they're expected to win it, and most likely it's not going to end up in overtime, but those are the scenarios you need to know if this game becomes a no contest.
So, Blair, I actually have a couple ideas here because I agree with Jesse. I don't think this game's going to be played. There's too many logistical problems for squeezing in this game. Also, the game takes on a different sort of significance if it's played after the Chiefs game, because they know the result of the Chiefs game, and therefore only one of those teams is playing for the number 1 seed, as opposed to they originally thought that both of them were playing for the number 1 seed if that game had happened last week. I don't know how hard the Bengals would be playing in that sort of game if the Chiefs win, and therefore they're playing for the difference between the 2 and 3 as opposed to the difference between 1 and 2. But I just keep coming back to if it's a no contest, both of those teams get punished. And I don't think that the result can be that the Bills and Bengals are punished for what happened here. Now, granted, there is no good options. So one idea that I don't think the NFL is going to adopt is you just go by the loss column. And therefore, the Chiefs are potentially the team punished, but also just potentially the team punished, because if the Bills had won, then they're in the same spot regardless. The other idea is you switch up the meaning of the number one seed, which is the number one seed could potentially have to play on opening weekend, and maybe the 2 seed gets a bye. And therefore, maybe they offer the Chiefs the option to say, you can have the 1 or the 2. You can either have the bye or you can have home field advantage in the AFC Championship. So it kind of splits the advantage of receiving that number 1 seed. It's a little bit of a compromise. I think it's a little bit icky if the Chiefs luck into the number 1 seed, and luck in is probably the wrong term to use because they will have won 14 games. But I don't think it's a great option that the Chiefs somehow benefit from the situation we saw there on Monday night.
Here's the problem, Sam. With everything you try to do, you come up with more complications. So if they do that with the 1 and 2 seed, the Bengals are sitting there saying, okay, now we're the ones that got punished. We were up 7-3 on the Bills at home, about to win and get the 2 seed, potentially the 1 seed. Now you're going to kick us to the 3 seed and give the Bills the advantage and the Chiefs the advantage. So there's just no way to do this. The only real way is to basically say this game didn't happen. And that's really essentially what took place. The game didn't happen, and it's probably not going to happen. So, I appreciate the trying to do this in fairness and everything, but the bottom line here is that these teams had other games. There were opportunities to win more games in the past, and nobody asked for this. The Chiefs didn't ask for this. The Bengals didn't ask for this. The Bills didn't ask for this. So to say one team benefits or not, it's just sort of the way it works because the game was never played. So I appreciate trying in the name of fairness to sort things out, but you just can't do it. I mean, that's the problem. You can't do it. So you have to do the least amount of harm, at least the way I see it. And the least amount of harm is just to act like the game didn't happen, because most likely the game's not going to happen.
Just a couple quick things to add into this. It just seems fundamentally unfair that the Chiefs should in some way benefit from a no game. I mean, now I'm not saying they have to play, but I don't know how that gets reconciled otherwise. The other thing that, I suppose this is in play, and it maybe it's not, but I wonder if there's some chance that the NFL thinks, let's get through this weekend and see if things fall in a certain way that might, clarify things. Now that's a lot to ask of scenarios that would be clarifying, right? But I don't know what's most fair, but I feel like the only way to get approximated is to somehow think about a way that the Bills and Bengals get the chance to do what they were going to have the chance to do if that hadn't happened. And can you push it back? Can we talk about a neutral site for an AFC Championship if the seeding's messed up? I mean, I don't know we can't know what's really in play, but I feel like everything should be in play to try to sift it down to its most fair approach. So
yeah, let's have the neutral site be the third city, whichever of these 3 teams.
Both in Cincinnati, Chiefs and Bills in Cincinnati.
Yeah, Chiefs and Bills in Cincinnati, Chiefs and Bengals in Buffalo, or Bills and Bengals here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
You get the finances and the concessions and the ticket sales and all that, at least.
I do think, guys, if we're looking at this and, with what's happened, it's just so complicated all the way around that it does feel bad. You don't want to benefit from that sort of thing. But for the NFL, when it first happened, they went to the players and the coaches and said, do you want to continue playing this game? And they obviously said no. And that was the right move, to go to the players. All these scenarios you're talking about, Vahe and Sam, I'm sort of thinking about this contingent that the NFL goes to the Bills and Bengals and says, we will make a Week 19 game for you if you want it. We will do this for you if you want it, if you believe that's the best way. I think if I'm the Bills and Bengals, I turn it down because I don't want to play an extra game. And frankly, this game now has become so emotional and so emotionally packed, not to mention the fact that, as you talked about, Vahe, there's a scenario where other teams could be hurt by this game being played in week 19, like there's a scenario out there where the Bengals be very not motivated to play any starter in that game against the Bills. Then the Bills could come out there and play their starters. The Bengals could lose the game on purpose. This would be a standalone game on national television. And all of a sudden the Bills get the 1 seed because, again, the Chiefs played early. The Bengals knew the stakes, and the Bengals knew they had nothing at stake. So there is no fairness in here. I get it. I mean, that it's a horrible situation the NFL have to deal with. But, again, it just feels like the more you mess with, the more you have to deal with consequences down the line that you're not thinking about. And that's why, to me, I'm not loving the no contest thing. I just think it's the only thing you can do to know all of the ramifications of what's going to happen down the line without picking a side and saying we're favoring this team or another. No contest means you are just basically saying the game didn't happen and you're not messing with everything else down the line. But I think the NFL, as they did in that game on Monday, will probably do the same thing here. Is if these two teams want to buckle up and play week 19, they should play it and they should get that game in. I just think that the Bengals and Bills are going to say enough's enough. We don't need to replay this game.
Well, I do think that, look, one of those teams is going to have a shot at the number 1 seed. So they would absolutely want sort of the freebie at the bye. But I just wanted to point out, I guess Adam Schefter, somebody posted a clip of it, has said that he does not believe the NFL is going to be playing this game. And he does think that they're going to allow the number 1 seed to choose between having the bye or having home field advantage, with the number 2 seed getting the alternative.
I mean, that screws Cincinnati. So, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens, but that's really tough for Cincinnati to have this happen then if they potentially are the number 3 seed.
Mike had heard the same thing about the split advantages and what you just referred to, Sam. And, Rob is saying something that I heard yesterday that maybe there's the NFL randomly would pick a Chiefs game to toss out, which is, I don't know how you would do that. I don't know if that's like a ping pong balls in a lottery. I don't know how that would happen, but I did hear that. I don't know where I heard it, but I heard that yesterday.
Heard a lot of options, Blair. That is by far the worst one I've heard. We've gone through a lot of scenarios.
We can all agree that one's the worst.
I hate that one.
Yeah.
Well, let me
go ahead.
Let me just one thing that I have thought about, and I thought about this from the Tuesday morning. The NFL has never had a season, and I confirm this, maybe since the 1930s, the mid-1930s, in which every team did not play the same number of games. So they've never been confronted with this issue through strikes, through pandemic, through JFK's assassination, everything that has stopped play for some reason or another.
9/11, Blair. They
9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah. The adjustments have been made. This would be the first NFL season that would have a different number of games played by certain teams. So just keep that in mind. The NFL, more than any other league, is about fairness, competitive fairness. They show it in their scheduling. They show it in their draft, all kinds of ways that the NFL makes things. It's the equal opportunity, salary cap, all things other sports don't have or have it in a limited way. So because of when it happened and to whom it happened, and for all these reasons, this is throwing such a wrench into the end of the regular season of the NFL.
It's the most important game on the schedule this year so far. And obviously some games in week 7 and week 18 will have a bigger impact, but the timing of this game, there was no game to date that was more important. And since both teams had a shot at the number 1 seed, a potential no contest is kind of a loss for both of them. And you don't the Bengals and Bills would agree to a coin flip to decide this game over just ruling it a no contest. At least they would have the opportunity to have the number 1 seed this weekend. But just to put a bow on this, I do think the NFL needs to make this decision before the Chiefs kick off on Saturday. One of the things talking to Patrick Mahomes is he was very aware that they're going to be the first team to take the field since this game was called on Monday night. And that's going to be a little bit of an odd feeling for the Chiefs. But I think that it's not just us in the media. I think the Chiefs also should know, are they playing for the number 1 seed? I mean, what is the impact of the game they're about to play? I understand sometimes you don't know all that information because some other games could fall afterwards and there'd be a domino effect about what it means, but that's not really the case here. And so I think that the NFL, whatever happens, we need to know what that's going to be before the Chiefs kick off on Saturday afternoon.
I'll end this on a positive note and just take exception to both. One thing that Sam and Blair both said there. Blair, you talk about the fairness. The NFL still has to play God a little bit here. And Sam wrote a great column earlier this week that obviously doesn't really have much meaning anymore because of how the Monday night game fell. But they put the Chiefs on Saturday, which potentially could put the Chiefs at a disadvantage. So they still have areas here where they play God, and it isn't done in the interest of fairness. It's done in the interest of ratings or potentially doing things right. And then Sam, the thing about the Bengals is a tie actually does help them slightly because it wins them the division, and they would not have to beat the Ravens coming up this weekend to be able to clinch that divisional title. So there is something small with that at least, and maybe not small if you're talking about the 3 seed compared to the 5 seed getting home games in the playoffs. So again, we talk about going toward the 1 seed. It's a lose-lose for both of these teams, but potentially for Cincinnati, it could make it sort of like last year where they had a Week 18 game, which really didn't do much for them in the standings. They chose to rest their starters, and they ended up in the Super Bowl. So we really don't know how the domino effect of all this stuff falls. But Cincinnati potentially would be a major loser, but yet still kind of a small winner if this thing ended up as a tie or, as we talked about, as a no contest.
Just one quick thought. I'm not really sure what the ramifications of this would have been, but I think we all didn't expect to get an answer on the timing of the Chiefs Raiders game until after the Bills Bengals game. But the NFL went ahead and made a decision Sunday. I wonder if the decision would have been the same after the horrible thing that happened Monday. And I'm not really sure what the ripples of that are, but I do wonder if the scheduling would have looked different.
Well, the other what if that I've thought about is, what if the Chiefs lose on Saturday? If they lose, then that kind of makes things a little easier for the decision makers, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what I was thinking when I said that before about if you see how things fall this weekend. I think your point is really correct, Blair, that it seems like we should know what the NFL is going to do before this weekend. On the other hand, if the Chiefs were to lose, that sets other things in motion in a different way. And it's not a given that the Bengals or Bills would win either.
That if the Chiefs lose this weekend, that game literally would have been for the number 1 seed, in which case I do think you would have to invoke sort of the split advantage of that number 1 seed that Adam Schefter has mentioned this morning. I don't know. Look, we've discussed a lot of options. The sum of it all is there are no good options here. You are trying to pick the least awful option out of this situation. And I don't know. I kind of had wondered if the NFL had considered reconfiguring its schedule to make these 2 teams be the game this weekend. And their 2 opponents play this weekend instead. I wondered just because this game had that kind of impact.
Real quick, Sam, I'll speak on behalf of the Chiefs here. It's a little bit unfair to have the Chiefs play 2 games before these other teams, like the Bills and Bengals, have played one of their last 2. You know what I mean? So we're talking about, the Chiefs have to earn this thing. Well, the other teams, again, not by choice, but they're sitting back and waiting for the results, and then they're playing appropriately. There's a reason these other sports like soccer, baseball, the last game of the year, they always sync them up at the same time, so you don't have that innate advantage. So I'll speak on behalf of probably what the Chiefs are thinking right now. It is a little bit unfair to have to play all these games in a row and give all that information out to the other teams that are chasing you to let them know and proceed accordingly when you're sort of, having to play all these games before they have to.
All right, guys. Terrific conversation. So much to talk about. So much unknown. But we'll all be paying attention over the next few days to see what happens. And all you guys heading out to Vegas, travel safely. Somehow find a way to enjoy your surroundings. And we'll talk after the game. We'll see what happens. We'll hopefully. Well, I don't know if we're going to say hopefully, but perhaps we'll know an answer about the rest of the season when we meet again, which will be sometime Thursday after the Chiefs-Raiders game. That'll do it for today. Thanks to George Howard for putting together the live stream and the podcast, and to our SportsBeat KC production crew of Monty Davis, Randy Mason, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Tip of the cap to Sam, Vahe, Herbie, and Jesse for their usual sharp insights. Morning Sports Edition was 43 pages today, all about the Bills and the NFL situation and everything else in sports. Check it out at liveedition.kansascity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.